In my own methodology, I give a lot of attention to reception and institutional framing of particular artistic practices. So one way of getting around the meta-narratives of art is to see how they function. Everything. You can name many. I think that Trava's arrival in Colombia in 1954 was one. I think the emergence of institutions in the 50s and 60s, the 1965 National Salon has never been studied, but it was, I think, a generational shift, a change in attitude around, I think that prior to 1965, the idea of the universality of art was still operant, and I think as of 1965, that could no longer hold. The Coltejer biennials and from 1968 to 1970, and then the 1981 iteration, which is no longer Coltejer biennial. I think the different regional, the regionalization of the National Salon is something that has not been studied. And again, I think that it's really important to understand Colombia as a plurivocal regional composite of different regions that are in dialogue with each other. And I think that that's a really important contribution that Colombia can make to the rest of the world in terms of a moment where we are trying to decentralize these meta-narratives. Colombia has never really been able to consolidate a meta-narrative, so understanding the different regionalisms and how they were positioning themselves for the construction of a viable modern culture. And then the role that, precisely because of this concept of regionalism, the role that Colombia has played in constituting a Latin Americanism. In terms of artistic practices, I think that drawing has been a very important medium in Colombia, and installation art has been very important for contemporary practice. More than anything, I think it's more of a thematic influence. Somehow or other, everything goes back to the landscape. And I think that the concept of landscape has permeated Colombian art since the 19th century, and it's still operative today. And if you think about the relationship of the Colombian landscape even to the armed conflict and to violence, that there's no way of escaping the landscape. So somebody like Jose Alejandro Restrepo's work with landscape and products of the land. The entire narco wars were based on a product of the land. The whole displacement of peoples is based on battles over land. And I think that artists have understood that the Colombian landscape is both the blessing and the curse of Colombia. Its topography has allowed for both the most exquisite biodiversity, but also the most fragmented society. Well, I think that those are historical terms. So I think that it's silly to use the word international today because that presumes a nation, a sovereign nation state that no longer operates. The term internationalism is historically appropriate when we're talking about a time period where the nation state is the channel through which power relations or the entity through which power relations are channeled economically, politically. And so that it makes an enormous amount of sense to talk about internationalism in terms of the world fairs, for instance, or the earlier biennials where you have national schools. It implies that there is a national school, and after World War II that there's an international exchange and collaboration to fight against the dangers of extreme nationalism. To talk about internationalism in the age of the internet and Panama Papers doesn't really necessarily make sense. And I think that in culture production, it's the same. On the other hand, I also think that to talk about global art is not unproblematic, because I think it's a way of redressing erudite cosmopolitanism, but based on a currency of difference that carries a very high, price tag with it. So I think that it's the term global, while more accurate, it also can be an eraser of the politics of representation in our time. A historian needs to understand the cultural, historical, social specificity of a moment of artistic creation and reception, but I don't believe in any requisites. I don't believe in any orthodoxies, and quite frankly, I think that some of the most exciting exhibitions come from enormous curatorial license. I think we have to move away from a concept of exhibitions as transmitting knowledge to one of knowledge production. And I think that the curator should have complete freedom to produce that knowledge by creating, artistic collages in that way. I think a historian has slightly different objective, and I think that it would be irresponsible history to completely decontextualize art from its history.